Jai Narsimha Puladesha Mukhapadma Jai Padma Banda Grambira Mahavishnu Jalantam Sarvotam Narsimham Deshanam Badram Muchanam Mahavne Vignavinasi Narsimha Bhagwan Ki Jai Bhakta Sravan Prahlad Maharaj Ki Jai Prabhupada Ki Jai Pure Bhaktam Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Chaturatma Prabhu, are you able to see us?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, all glories to Prabhupada, accept my obeisances.
Please accept my respectful obeisances to you.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to you, always Prabhupada. Thank you so much for giving your valuable time. To just give you a quick introduction, first time you are on the channel. His Grace Chaturatma Prabhu joined ISKCON in St. Louis, Missouri in 1973, and he received Brahminical initiation from Srila Prabhupada in June of 1974. In St. Louis, he installed Sri Nitai Gaur Natral in August of 1974. At that time, Chaturatma Prabhu started with his training in the deity program. By the year end, he was engaged as full-time pujari for Sri Nitai Gaur Natral. Then leaving St. Louis in 1976, he has served as head pujari in Dallas, Houston, Chicago, and on two of the Radha Damodar bus parties. He has served an assistant in the deity program in all three New York temples, 55th Street, 7th Avenue, and Brooklyn. Currently, he is serving on the deity management board for Radha Shyam Sundar in Alachua, Florida. He is also an advisor for the deity worship conference. As we all know, Prabhu was there, part of our deity installation at our own temple. So is well known to all of us, at least who are present at the time. Chaturatma Prabhu is widely known for his background in Ignas. While his basic training came from his early years of service in St. Louis, he has furthered his understanding and knowledge of deity service, Ignas, samskaras by studying from and learning from various sources over the years. In the early 1980s, Chaturatma Prabhu began to follow his interest in studying the lives of various acharyas. Researching many avenues of background, he has developed a very comprehensive picture of the lives of many acharyas in our lives since the time of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Has been invited to speak worldwide on the lives of Vaishnava acharyas. His work has included video presentation, lectures, and conversation with both adults and children. He currently travels a portion each year with Indradimna Swami Maharaj and His Grace Bada Hari Prabhu, assisting them with their preaching in Poland, Russia, Ukraine, and India. He resides in Alachua, Florida, with his wife, Pasupati Mataji. They have grown children and grandchildren. So thank you so much, Prabhu, for having. It is very fortunate. We are very fortunate to have you.
Hare Krishna.
Who joins? I sent him also, asked him to join. So we'll see.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of Srila Prabhupada in the glorification of Lord Nishringa Dev. I think it's pretty safe to say that Nishringa Dev is the favorite deity of every devotee. Even they are very attached to their Radha Krishna or their Lord Chaitanya. Still, Nishringa Dev holds a special place in the heart of all the devotees. There's so many wonderful stories. So today we'll try and give some glorification of his pastimes. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th Canto, Chapter 8. The chapter is entitled, Lord Nishringadev Slays the King of the Demons. One interesting point, we're going to read the chapter summary here. The chapter summaries were not always a part of the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the later volumes, we've become quite comfortable with looking at the summary and getting a general picture of the chapter that is being unfolded for us. But Prabhupada only started doing these chapter summaries at the beginning of the 5th canto. I had asked a couple of the devotees that were doing translation work for him and his servants, and they said, yes, just suddenly in the 5th canto, Prabhupada started including these because it gives a nice idea of what we've got ahead of us, particularly in this chapter, as the verses cover so much territory. It's nice to get a summary at the beginning of how Nishringadev is making his appearance here. So As described in this chapter, Hiranyakasipu was ready to kill his own son, Prahlad Maharaj, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared in the front of the demon as Sri Nrikeshari, half demon, half man, and killed him. Following the instructions of Prahlad Maharaj, all the sons of the demons became attached to Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When attachment became pronounced, their teachers, Sanda and Amarka, were very much afraid that the boys would become more and more devoted to the Lord. In a helpless condition, they approached Hiranyakasipu and described in detail the effect of Prahlad's preaching. After hearing of this, Hiranyakasipu decided to kill his son Prahlad. Hiranyakasipu was so angry that Prahlad Maharaj fell down at his feet and said many things just to pacify him, but he was unsuccessful in satisfying his demoniac father. Hiranyakasipu, as a typical demon, began to advertise himself as being greater than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But Prahlad Maharaj challenged him, saying that Hiranyakasipu was not God, and began instead to glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead, declaring that the Lord is all-pervading and that everything is under him and that no one is equal to or greater than him. Thus, he requested his father to be submissive to the omnipotent Supreme Personality of Godhead. The more Prahlad glorified the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the more angry and agitated the demon became. Hiranyakasipu asked his Vaishnava son whether his God existed within the columns of the palace. And Prahlad Maharaj immediately accepted that since the Lord is present everywhere, he was also present within the columns. When Hiranyakasipu heard this philosophy from his young son, he derided the boy's statement as just the talk of a child and forcefully hit the pillar with his fist. As soon as Hiranyakasipu struck the pillar, there issued forth a tumultuous sound. At first, Hiranyakasipu, the king of the demons, could not see anything but the pillar. But to substantiate Prahlad's statements, the Lord came out of the pillar in wonderful incarnation as Narasimha, half man and half lion. Hiranyakasipu could immediately understand that the extraordinarily wonderful form of the Lord was surely meant for his death. And thus he prepared to fight with the form of the half man, half lion. The Lord performed his pastimes by fighting with the demon for some time. And in the evening, on the border between day and night, the Lord captured the demon, threw him on his lap, and killed him by piercing the abdomen with his nails. The Lord not only killed Hiranyakasipu, the king of the demons, but also killed many of his followers. When there was no one else to fight, the Lord, roaring with anger, sat down on Hiranyakasipu's throne. The entire universe was thus relieved of the rule of Hiranyakasipu, and everyone was jubilant in transcendental bliss. Then all the demigods, headed by Lord Brahma, approached the Lord. These included the great saintly persons, the Pittas, the Siddhas, the Vidyaharas, the Nagas, the Manus, the Prajapatis, the Gandharvas, the Charanas, the Yakshas, the Kimpurushas, the Vaitalikas, the Kinkanaras, and also many other varieties of human beings. All of them stood not far from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and began to offer prayers unto the Lord, whose spiritual effulgence was bright as he sat on the throne. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Angumlam Jayate Girim Yakripa Tamaham Bande Sri Gurum Dinitarino Vanchakalpatirubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bahebacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shri Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Ugram Viram Mahavishnum Jvalatam Savata Mukam Nishringham Vishanam Badram Mrityam Naham Yaham. I bow down to Lord Nishringa, who is ferocious and heroic like Lord Vishnu. He is burning from every side. He is terrific, auspicious, and the death of death personified. Namaste Narasinghaya Praladadayane Hiranyakasipurvakshaha Siratam Kalnakalahe Hito Nasinga Parato Nasinga Hito Yamitato Nasinga Pahirna Singo Hridahe Nasingo Narasinga Madim Sadanam Prabhate Sina Singa Jaya Narasingha Praladadesha Jaya Padma Mukha Padma Vringa Vagisha Yashavandane Lakshmi Yashachavashati Yashate Hridahe Samvitam Narasinga Maham Bhaje Singha Bhagavan ki jai. So, Srila Prabhupada many times has mentioned that the Lord, he comes for two purposes. He has two main reasons when he incarnates. Most famously, he quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, as we all know, Paritranaya Saranam Vinasaya Chaduskritam Dharma Samstarpanapaya Sambhavami Juke Juke. In order to deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to reestablish the principles of religion, I advent myself millennium after millennium. So these are the two purposes why the Lord comes: to save the devotee, to get rid of the miscreants. Get rid of the miscreants, kill the demon. It's all in the same category there. But Prabhupada makes a very particular point. He says to kill the demon, Krishna does not personally need to come. How does he say it? He can send one hurricane and destroy so many demons at one time. But he does come to deliver the devotees. Yet, in this particular pastime, in this case of the situation with Hiranyakasipu, the Lord did have to come to kill the demon. He had to manifest for this particular purpose. As we all know, Hiranyakasipu had performed these very, very terrible and great austerities, standing on the tips of his toes and to the point where fire emanated out of his head and it was scorching the universe, and all of this just to get a boon from Lord Brahma. And at the culmination of all of this austerity, his whole body had become covered in one giant anthill. And the ants had eaten away at his skin and flesh and muscle and everything. And all that was left was just the bones. And somehow or another, he was keeping his life air circling within the bones. Now, I know you don't have this in New Jersey, but here in Florida, we have these creatures called fire ants. They're very, very tiny ants. And if you happen to unknowingly step in their path, or they have anthills all over the place, happen to push them aside with your foot when you're walking and disturb them, hundreds of them will latch onto your feet. And if you're barefooted, oh, you're going to regret this forever. They bite with just a ferocious, burning, painful kind of, so much so that even a strong grown man becomes disturbed by it and reaches down. And they don't just brush off easy. You can't wash them off easily with water. They're very, very painful creature. And you can imagine Hiranyakasipu, his entire body is being eaten and devoured by these ants. Yet he maintains his austerity. This is how strict, this is how renounced, this is how austere and foolish in the ultimate sense his performance was. Whatever it took, to the point that the body was eaten all the way down to the bones. This is how determined he was to be fixed in his vow like this. And this caused a great disturbance to the whole universe. One person like this, just as we know by Prahlad Maharaj, just holding his breath. Dhruva Maharaj, holding his breath when he was doing austerities, the universe was suffocating. So Hiranyakasipu was having this kind of impact, so much so that Lord Brahma himself was called on to please go and take care of him, pacify this person. Such a serious austerity beyond anything we can imagine in our lives and times. So Lord Brahma comes, and he sprinkles him with the divine water from his Kamadalu and completely revives Hiranyakasipu. And not just revives him, but the third chapter of the seventh canto gives this description. As soon as he was sprinkled with the water from Lord Brahma's water pot, Hiranyakasipu arose, endowed with a full body, with limbs so strong that they could bear the striking of a thunderbolt, with physical strength and a bodily luster resembling molten gold. He emerged from the anthill, a completely young man, just as fire springs from the wood. So now Hiranyakasipu is not unintelligent. We shouldn't make the mistake of just equating him as some foolish demon. He was actually very intelligent, very informed, and he was also not ungrateful to be the recipient of the mercy of Lord Brahma. He actually spends the next 10 verses in this chapter glorifying Lord Brahma with very eloquent prayers, giving great appreciation and praise to the person who has rejuvenated his body. And we can also see from the instructions that Hiranyakasipu gave to his family members in the third canto, after Lord Vishnu killed Hiranyaksha, his brother, he was quite understanding of what was the Vedic principles, of what was proper knowledge. So, he gives these prayers to Brahma, and then at the end of the prayers, he makes his request. Very intelligent person. Glorify someone, then ask something of them. You are such a great temple president. You have done such a wonderful job. Can I have $5 for Volga, please? So here's what Hiranyakasipu says. May I not be killed by any living entity. May I not be killed in any place, covered or uncovered. May I not die in the daytime or the nighttime. May I not be killed by any weapon. May I not be killed on the land or in the air. May I not be killed by any human being, animal, demigod, or any other living entity, living or non-living. May I have supremacy over the entire universe and gain all 8 yogic perfections. So we might question, it's a pretty big order to ask for, He actually wanted immortality, but Lord Brahma, of course, couldn't offer that to him because Lord Brahma is not immortal himself. You can only give what you have. If someone says to you, can you loan me $10? You can only do it if you've got $10 in your pocket. If you don't have $10, you don't have the ability to fulfill that desire. So Hiranyakasipu has requested Lord Brahma, give me immortality. Well, I can't give you that. I don't have it. Okay, then give me the following. And he goes through this list we just read. And by this list, he thinks he's actually achieved immortality in some kind of a backdoor type of way. All right, you didn't give me immortality, but you gave me this, and this. Therefore, now I'm immortal. This is why in this particular pastime, we see that the Lord had to come to kill the demon, because Hiranyakasipu had marked everything else off the board. Nothing else was going to cause his death. This was going to secure his longevity and his immortal nature. So he had these blessings that for all practical purposes did make him immortal. And thus the never before seen incarnation of Lord Nishringa appeared in a form, at a time, and with weapons that he had never used before on any type of demon when he appeared. So it was all due to these benedictions that Lord Brahma gave. Now, there's a little funny story after this. Prabhupada mentions on one tape in a lecture that when this whole pastime with Nishringa was finished and Hiranyakasipu was killed, Nishringa chastised Lord Brahma. He said, in the future, don't give any benedictions like this. You've made things very difficult for me. So now We know that the Lord has many different types of incarnations, many different types of avatars. So it's mentioned in the Bhagavad that there are the various kinds of avatars, such as Purusha Avatars, Guna Avatars, Lila Avatars, Saktavesh Avatars, Manva Avatars, and Yuga Avatars, all appearing on schedule throughout the universe for their different purposes. So let's examine those for a moment. It's an important understanding. Purusha Avatars. Purusha Avatars are the incarnation of the Lord in various plenary expansions for the purpose of creative incarnations and duties. And then you have the Guna Avatars. Well, of course, we know by the name Guna. Guna Avatars, these are the incarnations that rule over the three modes of material nature, the gunas. Shaktavesh Avatars, these are incarnations of a jiva who represent a particular opulence of the Lord for fulfilling a particular purpose. The Manvantar Avatars, these are incarnations that reign during each of the Manu periods. And actually, Bhagavatam says that there is no possibility of counting how many Manvantar avatars there are. There's the Yuga avatars, and these are the incarnations that appear in each of the different yugas for a very specific and particular purpose. And then what we mostly refer to, and most of us are familiar with, is the Lila avatars. And these Lila avatars are an incarnation that appear for a variety of activities without making any special endeavor. And there's always some particular pastime associated with these Lila avatars, and their appearance is full of transcendental pleasure. This we all know anyway. So there are 25 of these Lila avatars in one day of Lord Brahma. We, however, were mostly familiar with the 10 main avatars that are discussed. They're given to us as the Das avatar. And these are very widely spoken about in our history and our culture, our background, and we're all very familiar with them. So Nishringa is one of the more well-known of these Das avatars. So now we have a clear picture of why the Lord comes, how he comes in his different forms, and what was the purpose of him coming in this particular incarnation. But as we mentioned in the beginning, Krishna says, I appear for two reasons, to annihilate the demon and protect the devotees. So that second part, protecting the devotees, is not lost. It's not neglected in this incarnation by any means. Krishna has come to save this devotee. Now, this is a very interesting thing. Krishna, for instance, when he appeared as Krishna during his pastimes, he saved the Yadu dynasty, the entire dynasty. When he appeared as Vamana, his purpose was to save all the planetary systems, all three planetary systems and the demigods. When he appeared as Kurma to support the Mandara mountain, it was also, again, to save all the demigods. When he appeared as Parashuram, it was to save Mother Bhumi from the burden of all of these demoniac rulers. And it goes on like that with each incarnation. So in each case, there was an entire group or a collection of persons that were saved by the Lord, that this was the devotee or devotees that he was saving. And each time it would show how amazing that particular incarnation is. In this incarnation, we see how amazingly important Prahlad Maharaj is. This incarnation of Nishringa appears for the sole purpose of saving one devotee, Prahlad Maharaj, one devotee. This is why Nishringa appeared, to save Prahlad Maharaj. It's the only incarnation we see where he saves one individual in this way and appears for that particular purpose, just Prahlad. The demigods, they're all benefited, no question. Getting rid of Hiranyakasipu was a great benefit to the entire universe. But as far as saving, this was Prahlad Maharaj. The entire universal creation is benefited. But the salvation that he came and brought with him was for Prahlad Maharaj. Now, Krishna does state this in the Bhagavad Gita, that he appears to honor the word of his devotee as well. What is that? The Konteya Patijanani Name Bhakta Pranasyati. Krishna says to Arjuna, you declare this, that I will always protect my devotee, and I will do it. Prabhupada here again says in one lecture, Krishna has Arjuna declare this, because sometimes Krishna is a little tricky, Prabhupada says. And people may think, oh, he might not do. But if Krishna's devotee says something, then Krishna always appears. Krishna always manifests. He always follows it. So in his final exchange with his father, after so many efforts to make him come out of his ignorance, Hiranyakasipu challenges Prahlad. Is your God in this pillar? You're always talking about some superior person to me, this Vishnu. Is he in the pillar? Prahlad Maharaj says, of course he's in the pillar. Hiranyakasipu retorts, now she'll destroy him. So to keep the word of his devotee, this is why Nishringadev appears from the pillar. Nishringadev could have appeared from anywhere in that same form to do anything. But because the devotee has said, yes, my God is in that pillar, therefore he appeared from that pillar to fulfill the promise of keeping the word of his devotee. So we see how important of a Vaishnava Prahlad Maharaj is. We all know this anyway, but here in these examples, we see how important of a devotee he is, that Nishringadev would come just for the purpose of saving him and honoring his word, because he said, yes, that's where my Lord is. He's there in that pillar. So then he came out in this form. And when he came out in this form, Hiranyakasipu was actually taken aback. I mean, this is a demon that's been in numerous battles, has fought many different living entities, has conquered the entire universal creation, and has seen a lot. But in this chapter of the Bhagavatam, there's this description of what he perceives when Nishringadev comes out of the pillar. In amazement, Hiranyakasipu wondered, what is this creature that is half man and half lion? Hiranyakasipu studied the form of the Lord, trying to decide who the form of Lord Nishringadev standing before him was. He wasn't able to perceive right off that this is Lord Vishnu. He'd never seen a form like this. He had no way to put it into his understanding of what he was looking at. The Lord's form was extremely fearsome because of his angry eyes, which resembled molten gold. His shining mane, which expanded the dimensions of his fearful face, his deadly teeth, and his razor-sharp tongue, which moved about like a dueling sword. His ears were erect and motionless, and his nostrils and gaping mouth appeared like the caves of a mountain. His jaws parted fearfully, and his entire body touched the sky. His neck was very short and very thick. His chest was very broad. His waist was thin, and the hairs on his body were as white as the rays of the moon. His arms, which resembled flanks of soldiers, spread in all directions as he killed the demons, the rogues, and the atheists with his conch shell, disc, club, lotus, and other natural weapons. Such a wonderful description is given here by Sukadeva Goswami. Now, in verse 31, it says, many, many arms, but not just many, many arms as noted in this verse. In some Shastras, it describes thousands of arms that Nishringadev had. Now, we note here that the description given is flanks of soldiers. Now, a flank is referred to as a formation 8 soldiers deep. So 8 series deep of arms surrounding in all directions. This is the description of the arms in Nishringa. We can just imagine unlimited presentation seen here. So we see the effort and the arrangement that the Lord has to go through for this incarnation, all to keep the word of his other devotee, Lord Brahma. Because Hiranyakasipu was very, very specific. What was it he said back here? No human being, no animal, no demigod, and no other living entity, living or non-living. So he's covered everything. Hiranyakasipu has thought this out very clearly. I don't want to be killed by any of these types of creatures. So therefore, we see the detail that Lord Vishnu has had to go through as this appearance of Hiranyakasipu manifests itself. It's such an amazing effort. We have to ask, what is it that a child could have done to provoke his father in such a way that the father would want to kill him? This is completely out of the normal. It's often said that the highest love is that exemplified between the parent and the child. Those of you that are listening that have children, you know this. You would do anything for your child. Give up anything, sacrifice anything, surrender anything for the benefit of your child. This is the natural arrangement. But here we see Hiranyakasipu wants to kill his son. So we have to ask, what could Prahlad have done to provoke the father in this way? Excuse me. Nowadays, we read in the news or hear on the news programs, whatever, so many different types of heinous crimes that people do against family members. And, oh, well, maybe it was something like this, maybe it was something like that. No, nothing detailed like that. There's a nice lecture in 1972 where Prabhupada says, Prahlad's only fault was that he was a devotee. He wanted to declare the supreme position of Lord Vishnu. This is how demoniac Hiranyakasipu was. Simply because of the faith of his son, because of his beliefs, he wanted to kill him. Because those very beliefs were contrary to the life that Hiranyakasipu was putting forth. It's interesting, most of you won't be familiar with this, but back in the early 70s, the early to mid 70s in ISKCON, there was a phenomena called deprogramming. And it was common for devotee parents, for the parents of devotees who had joined ISKCON, to become very, very upset and distraught and disturbed by the fact that their child had become a Vaishnava. They had no understanding of what Krishna consciousness was. Most Americans had no understanding of other world cultures. And as a result, there was a lot of fear. So there was a group of individuals called deprogrammers. For several $1,000s, the family would hire these people. They would kidnap devotees off the street or from different events. I had 2 or 3 different friends that had this happen, kidnapped right off the street, thrown into a van like you see in these scenarios, and rushed off to a place and put into a room. And efforts were made to literally deprogram them from Krishna consciousness, to take them away from this culture. Try to force them to eat meat, or try to force them to drink alcohol, or try to encourage them to have a relationship with an old girlfriend or boyfriend, different scenarios like this. And in some cases they were successful. In most cases they weren't. Eventually, legal cases were brought against them that this was criminal kidnapping and so on, and this type of practice will stop. And then eventually parents came to understand a bit more about Krishna consciousness, and it wasn't seen as such an oddity. But this was a thing happening. simply due to the beliefs that the children had taken up. Here we see Hiranyakasipu pushes that envelope even further. Not only the idea of deprogramming his child, but killing the child. If you won't give up what you believe, if you won't accept my position, then I will kill you. This is the mood. And all because he was preaching. And he preached very diligently. Prahlad Maharaj was an expert preacher. He would take every opportunity when his teachers were not present to preach to his schoolmates. There's an entire chapter of the Bhagavatam in the 7th canto that deals with Prahlad Maharaj's lessons to his schoolmates. How he instructs them in Krishna consciousness, how he instructs them in the necessity of spiritual focus in their life, how he instructs them as to the futility of material pursuit, trying to be like their fathers and so on like that. He takes every opportunity to give Krishna consciousness. It's a wonderful example for us as preachers, as followers of Srila Prabhupada. We see Srila Prabhupada very similarly, just for the sake of fulfilling the order of his spiritual master, came to America in a very precarious circumstance. He had 2 heart attacks on the boat. His age was quite old. It was very uncommon for someone to travel halfway around the world at that age, start a whole new lifestyle, and with no funding. When he approached Sumati Maraji to get the ticket on the steamship, she begged him, Swami, you'll go to America and die. You have no idea what's there. She was a bit more worldly at the time. But Prabhupada was convinced, and he took those risks, and we see all of us sitting here today are the result of that. So Prahlad Maharaj had that type of bold preaching for the eternal religious principles that he understood were of the most importance to his classmates. And all of this, how did he know this? All of this because he had learned it from Narada Muni. When he was staying in the ashram, through the womb of his mother, when he was staying in the ashram of Narada Muni, he listened to everything. This is an important point. We understand even modern society itself is beginning to be much more appreciative of the idea of the sensitivity of the child in the womb to outside influences. It's becoming more commonly accepted. We've known this for years. Many of us, when the wife is pregnant with the child, there's reading to the child, kirtan is played for the child, all while the child is the womb. Because this sound vibration impacts the growth, the consciousness, the meditation that this living entity is going to be absorbed in. And this is what was going on with Prahlad Maharaj. Imagine all throughout your mother's pregnancy, you're staying in the ashram of Narada Muni and hearing from Narada Muni the instructions that he's giving daily, the classes that he's giving, the conversations that he's having. Narada's not talking about anything that's a waste of time. Everything that Narada Muni speaks about is of the divine principle, of the divine intelligence, of the divine consciousness. So in this way, Prahlad Maharaj is hearing this day in and day out during the course of his residence, if you might say, in the womb of his mother. Therefore, by the mercy of Narada Muni, he had this conviction, he had this understanding of what is Krishna consciousness, of how valuable the human life is, and how the two, Krishna consciousness and his human life, have to be joined together for our best and ultimate benefit. So, of course, all of this was totally against the will of Hiranyakasipu. Hiranyakasipu had no interest in his son's Krishna consciousness, in his preaching, in his sharing of the divine wisdom of the Bhagavat. Hiranyakasipu wanted simply that his son would become a good demon and follow in his own footsteps and control the universe. Vishnu had, after all, killed his brother, Hiranyaksha. So to have a son who is in favor of Vishnu, who was supporting Vishnu, this was completely contrary to the desires of what Hiranyakasipu wanted from his family, from his heir-to-be. Vishnu was not going to thwart his plans to be the controller of the three worlds like he had his brothers. So in this way, he decided he was going to make a very strong step forward. He actually challenged Prahlad. You're always talking about a supreme person, a supreme being more powerful than me, someone other than me. And he considered himself to be the topmost personality. This is the degree of arrogance, the degree of pride, and ultimately the degree of ignorance that Hiranyakasipu held, that he actually thought himself to be the supreme being. Because I'm immortal. I got all these blessings from Lord Brahma. Nobody can kill me that's like this. Nobody can kill me here. Nobody can kill me with this kind of weapon. So I've covered all the bases. I'm now immortal. I'm as good as the supreme. Prabhupada would often quote, "Pride cometh before the fall." And this pride that Hiranyakasipu is manifesting, this pride that Hiranyakasipu has in his position, is certainly a testament to that. And of course, we see the fall that would come about. But ultimately, this type of attitude is what brings about the idea that he should kill his own son. Now, he tried many ways. We know all the different ways from the Bhagavatam. He tried boiling him in oil. He tried throwing him into a pit of poisonous snakes. He tried throwing him off the top of a large, tall mountain. He tried having him attacked by sharp weapons by varieties of demons. He tried having him trampled under the feet of an elephant. And as the Bhagavatam says, and 1,000 other ways that were all unsuccessful. Hiranyakasipu took that intelligence he had and devised so many different plans on how he could kill his son. And every single one of them was unsuccessful because Prahlad Maharaj was never fearful and always took shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in each situation. Every single time he was taking shelter of the holy name, chanting very steadfastly, knowing clearly within his heart that the Lord was going to protect him because he was the Lord's devotee. Sarvadharma parityajam mamekam saranam vraja. As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. And he's surrendering everything. You're going to burn my body in a fire? Okay, I'm still going to chant. You're going to boil me in oil? Okay, I'm still going to chant. You're going to throw me off the mountain? I'm still going to chant. In every situation, he took shelter of Lord Krishna. And in every single situation, Lord Krishna saved him. The elephant became a devotee practically, offering obeisances to him. He was not harmed at all by the boiling oil. He was captured in the air by Krishna being thrown off the mountain. Every situation, Krishna stepped in and saved Prahlad. And this did the important aspect of strengthening Prahlad's faith. This gave him the conviction each time Krishna saved him that Krishna will save me again. And every single time, as the Bhagavatam says, thousands of ways that Hiranyakasipu tried to kill his son. Every time he was saved. This is such a horrific crime against a devotee. At one point, the Lord simply could not allow the persecution of his devotee Prahlad Maharaj to go on anymore. And when Hiranyakasipu makes that final attack, I will now sever your head from your body. This is when Nishringa makes his appearance. This is what Krishna will do, the extents he will go to protect his devotee. Now, it's interesting. When Nishringa appears, he toys with Hiranyakasipu. We see that the Bhagavatam describes how he didn't just come right out, kill him, and that was the end of it. The Lord wants to play for a bit. So he toyed with him. Describes like a cat plays with a mouse, or Garuda plays with a snake. I don't know if any of you have ever had the opportunity to observe this, but when a cat captures a mouse, there's very little chance for the mouse. So the cat will take some time and literally batting with his paws the mouse around, with the claws on the end of him, slapping at the mouse, knocking it unconscious, putting fear in the mouse, and such a way repeatedly that the mouse becomes exhausted. And then many times, the cat will let the mouse free a little bit, and the mouse will think, oh, start to run off, and the cat captures it again. So playing with it in such a way that there's no hope for the mouse. So in this way, this back and forth capture, let go, back and forth, this is similar to the exchange of battle between Hiranyakasipu and Nishringa. Hiranyakasipu would come and attack, think that he could, and then the Lord would swipe at him, and then he'd get away, and then he'd come back in. Constantly, this went on like this. But still, in spite of this, Hiranyakasipu was still filled with arrogance. It states in this chapter we're looking at on verse 23, Hiranyakasipu murmured to himself, Lord Vishnu, who possesses great mystic power, has made this plan to kill me. But what is the use of such a plan? Who can fight with me? Thinking like this and taking up his club, Hiranyakasipu again attacked the Lord like an elephant. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, appears as Nishringadev, this never seen before appearance, combining man and lion with thousands of arms and a huge mane and this description given, and still Hiranyakasipu thinks, who can kill me? It's just not possible. Okay, this is pretty fearful, but he can't kill me. I've got this boon. This is how arrogant the demon can be. Now, after the fight, which covers quite a few verses, it actually, in reality, took much, much longer. The description of the fight is covered in a handful of verses in the Bhagavatam. But some places, it's described in different shastras, that the fight actually lasted for one kalpa. That's a very long period of time. So in the conclusion, as the fight is winding down to its final stages, there's a quote given here. Lord Nishringadev captured Hiranyakasipu, who could not be pierced even by the thunderbolt of King Indra. As Hiranyakasipu moved his limbs here and there and all around, very much afflicted by being captured, Lord Nishringadev placed the demon on his lap, supporting him with his own thighs. And in the doorway of the assembly hall, the Lord very easily tore the demon to pieces with the nails of his hands. Lord Nishringadev's, well, actually, some of you may have been in ISKCON long enough to remember the old glory days of ISKCON TV. It was a movie-making entity run by Nishringananda and Siddhanta Prabhus in Los Angeles. And they produced an amazing collection of films that have been around for years and years and years. And they did straight Krishna conscious films and then commentaries on documentaries. One that they did, there's a West Coast devotee whose name is Madhu Pandit, and he was a commentator on a BBC film on the Serengeti and the struggle for life in the Serengeti, and how this described all the different activities. One of these, for instance, lions taking down their prey. And it would show in this documentary the lions tearing at, an antelope and, blood smeared on their face and, ripping at the intestines and all like that, like lions would do with an antelope. The description given here of Nishringadev after he kills Hiranyakasipu is quite vivid. Lord Nishringadev's mouth and mane were sprinkled with drops of blood from the demon, and his fierce eyes, full of anger, were impossible to look at. Licking the edge of his mouth with his tongue, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Nishringa, decorated with a garland of intestines taken from Hiranyakasipu's abdomen, resembled a lion that had just killed an elephant. You can just picture this scene in your mind. Here again, an incarnation of the Lord like none other, an incarnation where the Lord is actually decorated with the blood and intestines of his opponent. And it only enhances his beauty. This is quite an amazing thing. We don't see that after the Lord kills Putana, or after the Lord kills Pralambasura, or even in other incarnations after the Lord kills Hiranyaksha, that he decorates himself with the bodily parts of these demons, or that he's sprinkled, so to speak, in their blood. This is the unique pastime, again, of Nishringa, that these things are present. Now, in 1973, Srila Prabhupada made a very interesting point on this lecture. At this point in the pastime of Nishringa, he says, Prahlad Maharaj is standing there as his father is being killed. Is this proper? Is this moral? Would you like to see that your father is being killed in your presence and you stand there, you do not protest? Is that moral? Nobody will approve of this. No, actually, this is what happened with Hiranyakasipu when he was being killed. You can see, the picture is there. Hiranyakasipu is killed on the lap of Nishringa, and Prahlad Maharaj is trying to garland the killer. My dear Lord killer, please you take this garland. You have killed my father. You are very good. And then Prabhupada laughs. So you see, Prabhupada says, this is the spiritual understanding. Nobody will sanction that. If you cannot protect your father, you must protest. You must cry out, here, my father's being killed. Someone come and help, come and help, come and help. But no, instead, Prahlad Maharaj, he is preparing a garland. And when the father is killed, Prahlad Maharaj says to Nishringa, my dear Lord, my father is now killed by you. Everyone is very happy. Now you can please wind up your angry mood. So this type of thinking, this can only be done by a devotee and the Lord when they're executing their pastimes together. Prahlad Maharaj makes a point. Now my father's dead. Everyone's happy. All of the oppressed peoples that he was controlling were happy. All the demigods were happy. All the devotees were happy. Everyone was happy to see Hiranyakasipu finished because he was such a disturbance to the natural order of the universe. He was filled with so much arrogance and ego and pride as to his position and the difficulty that he brought with that, that everyone was happy to see him go. So this gives one other point to be further examined. How could such a demon, a low-class person, we have to be honest, I mean, despite Hiranyakasipu's intelligence and learning, he was a low-class individual because he was inimical to the personality of Godhead. How could such a person as that be engaged in fighting with the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself? It's impossible for someone like you or I to even get a meeting with the president of a small country, what to speak of the president of the United States. So how is it possible that someone like Hiranyakasipu would be able to fight with the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Prabhupada gives us the answer. This is why it's so important that we read Prabhupada's books and listen to Prabhupada's lectures, because he answers all of these questions of any topic that will come up as we understand the teachings of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada says, just like sometimes a big man or a big king, they engage a wrestler to fight with them. They pay the wrestler to fight with the king. But he's not the king's enemy. He's simply taking that role. He gives pleasure to the king by fighting. It is mock fighting, serious fighting, but it is not real anger or animosity towards each other. Similarly, when Krishna wants to fight, who will fight with him? Some of his great devotees. Some great devotee, he will fight with him. He will be appointed, not an ordinary person, just like the king. If he wants to practice mock fighting, they don't give just anyone. They give a very qualified, exalted fighter. And then the wrestling is done. So similarly, that is the service of some persons. Because Krishna wants to fight, some devotee has to come and fulfill that desire of Krishna, become his enemy, just like Jai and Vijay. This Hiranyakasipu and Hiranyaksha. Do you think they are ordinary living entities? That Nishringadev, God himself, will come to kill them? How could they be ordinary jivas? No, they are not ordinary. They are devotees. But Krishna wanted to fight with them. In the Vaikuntha world, there is no question of fighting with Krishna because everyone, they're engaged in Krishna's service. So who will he fight with? I want to fight. Who will fight with me? No one will volunteer. Therefore, he sends a devotee in the garb of an enemy, and Krishna then comes to fight with him. And at the same time, he teaches us that becoming the enemy of Krishna is not a very profitable idea. It is better to become his friend. So this is a very important understanding as to the identity of Hiranyakasipu and Hiranyaksha. Krishna has a desire to fight. Now, sometimes, for instance, in the relationships with the cowherd boys, this can manifest in a very friendly way. We see that the cowherd boys all wrestle with each other, and sometimes Krishna loses and has to carry another cowherd boy on his back. And this is all great fun. This is all wonderful pastimes that the cowherd boys have, and this is very unique. But in the greater universal creation, Lord Vishnu, sometimes he himself wants to have these types of fighting pastimes. This is the nature of someone identifying in the Kshatriya mode. They want to fight. They want to practice. You know, if you're a gym rat, as they say, you have to go to the gym every day and do this. If you don't do it, you lose the touch. So in the same way, just like slokas, I'll kind of embarrassingly admit here, when I was a young brahmachari, and I was a young brahmachari at one point in my life, when I was a young brahmachari, I had a stack of sloka cards, and every day, by the time Guru Puja came around, all the japa was done and all the slokas had been recited. Boom, 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 boom. But if you don't recite those slokas every day, you lose them. Now I know only a fraction of those. This is true. This is what happens. So in the same way, a fighter has to fight regularly to keep up their skill. The king is the greatest of warriors, but he doesn't become a great warrior by sitting on a throne and being fed grapes. He has to go out and fight. He has to go out and battle. Thus, as Prabhupada says, someone is elected. Okay, you wrestle with the king. Who, me? Yes. You're the best wrestler we've got. Go wrestle with the king so that the king can keep his skills honed. Krishna, not only for the purpose of keeping his skills as a warrior, but for enacting the pastimes with his devotees. Let me find someone who can fight with me. To this case, we know the history of Jai and Vijay, that they were cursed by the four Kumaras. Okay, you can be 7 births as a devotee in the material world or 3 births as a demon. This is how intelligent Jai and Vijay were. We shouldn't think they were just doorkeepers, chokidar. They're the chokidar. They're simply at the gate. They don't know anything. Sometimes we see in different places in Vrindavan, the chokidar is really not the most threatening of personalities. You know, sometimes he's mostly asleep. But the case of Jai and Vijay, they were very serious. And they were very knowledgeable because they were Vaikuntha residents. So they were given the choice, 3 births as demons. Oh, I don't want to be a demon, or 7 births as devotees. But their thought was, it doesn't matter what I am. I'm in the material world. Let me get out of there as quick as I can. So they took the 3 births as demons. of which Hiranyakasipu and Hiranyaksha are one of those births. So in this way, they were able to fulfill the curse of the four Kumaras and satisfied the desire of the personality of Godhead for his fighting tendency with his devotee. So this is how someone like Hiranyakasipu would actually be able to engage in the different types of battle with Nishringadev, because he was ultimately the personality of Godhead's devotee fulfilling a role, and fulfilling it very expertly, we might say as well. Therefore, we can see for our own benefit, as Prabhupada says here, it is better to be Krishna's friend. It is more profitable to be Krishna's friend. So this storyline is very instructive to us on so many different levels, that ultimately as to how we should become a devotee of the Lord. And then we will get the blessings, the fortune, and the understanding of the spiritual principles of Krishna consciousness. And this will be our ultimate benefit in this human life. So this is just a little bit of something we can take from the pastime of Nishringadev killing Hiranyakasipu and appreciate the importance of this pastime. And as Prabhupada said, always pray for the protection of Nishringadev. So with that, we'll finish here. All glories to Nishringa Bhagavan, all glories to Sri Prahlad Maharaj, all glories to the Vaishnavas. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'll finish here as I was asked at 9. And if anyone has any questions or comments or corrections, we'll be happy to field those at this time. We'll turn it over to you, Krishna Namananda.
Thank you so much for wonderfully narrating, explaining end to end. It's covered pretty much, especially finding out what Prabhupada has said. Wonderful. So, dear devotees, please ask questions if you have any. Otherwise, I will ask questions.
One thing I can do, you mentioned in your notes to me about Nishringa Shilas and like that. I can take the page over, or the camera over, rather, to my Nishringa altar.
Sure, sure, Prabhu, go ahead.
Give you that darshan. Properly. Here we go.
Jai, Jai, Saligram Shila ki Jai. You can see, that is Nishringa Shila, I can see. Jai. Okay. Now you can elaborate and explain a little bit about those Saligram Shilas.
Prabhuji, we cannot see.
We just saw it.
I don't know. It was not on my screen.
No, I can show again. I can show again.
You.
We can have unlimited darshan.
Yes, now we can see. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
We lost it now. No, I think the
Somehow
spotlight.
we cannot see it, Prabhuji.
Namru Prabhu, can you spotlight? I think Chaturatma Prabhu. We lost his video or what? Chaturatma Prabhu, we lost your video. Maybe he's setting up there, moving.
You have to pin the video on your individual screen.
No, I think now it is.
We saw it for a while, yes.
No, now, yeah. Let's look at closely. Jai, Jai. Wow. So wonderful. Everybody can see now the Saligram Shilas. The
Yes.
big one, nudging the Saligram Shila. Looks like. It's wonderful.
Wonderful darshan. Haribol.
Can you
All right,
explain
so
a little
as
bit?
I say, thank you so much for the, and of course, over my shoulder here, you see my own altar here with Govardhan and Raghunath and Srila Prabhupada's room there.
And the Almara you are talking about, Prabhu?
What's that?
You're talking about within the Almara? you're talking, or on the altar you are saying? The Govardhan.
Yes, Govardhan is on the top, and then Raghunath and the Shalagrams are on the second. And the lower shelf there is Srila Prabhupada's room, Darshan.
Beautiful.
So, anything else?
Devotees, anyone has questions, you can ask on the deity worship or anything about Shaligram Shilas, any of those. Prabhu can, yeah, go ahead. Taruni Radha Mata, go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for very wonderful darshan and the wonderful class. Dandavats, Prabhuji. My question today was, you were saying in your narration how Prahlad Maharaj, once he realized that when his father was giving him so much of trouble, that Krishna is saving him. And then the next time when the atrocity was again administered upon Prahlad, he realized that Krishna will again save me. So it went on that his faith became deeper and deeper with each new trial that his father was trying to do or perform. So I was thinking in our life as devotees, to get that initial faith that Krishna is there, he's going to support, and go to personally go through a trial ourselves, it's very hard. You need a lot of faith. And then once you realize that you come out of it, and then you realize that Krishna has saved you, our faith also similarly gets deepened. And then next time something happens, we immediately call out to Krishna. So my question is, for somebody, for a new person to undergo their first trial and completely surrender and depend upon Krishna, it is very hard. So is there any way that we can help them to deepen that faith and call upon Krishna, so that, you know, they face their
There's
first
two
trial?
answers that come to mind.
Yes, Prabhuji.
One is that association is essential in our developing our Krishna consciousness and in our advancement in spiritual life. Whether we're a new devotee or a very old devotee, that association is essential. So for new persons who are experiencing these trials and tribulations, the association of devotees that have already gone through these difficulties, that have realized the importance of relying on Krishna, this is very important in helping them get through it. I also am reminded from your question, the 8th chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and that is the prayers of Queen Kunti. In these prayers, Queen Kunti is not only appreciating her faith as she and the rest of the family members go through these trials and tribulations, she's actually praying for these trials and tribulations because they help her to remember Krishna more prominently. And Prabhupada speaks to this many times, you know, when there's a difficult situation, oh God, please save us. So we're more dependent at those times. So in the same way, we can see that these difficulties will bring us to remember Krishna more, to depend upon Krishna more. And part of the way that happens is, as you've noted, that we had that experience once, and so then we build on that, and then we build on it again. This process of faith is actually not simply faith, but it's very scientific. Krishna got me through this situation, therefore I should be able to expect that Krishna will get me through this situation. And it happens, and it concludes like that, and we go on. So you're right, it does take a certain amount of faith, but that association is what helps us strengthen that faith, and the knowledge of what's in the Shastras, such as this 8th chapter of the first canto, give us the ability to develop that faith. Very good question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
I always recommend to the devotees that the 8th chapter of the Bhagavatam, Prayers of Queen Kunti, is such a wonderful section of the Bhagavatam to read. It's so important that the BBT many years ago took Prabhupada's lectures on that chapter and made a whole separate book. We all have seen it, Teachings of Queen Kunti. It's a very important book, very, very essential information there. All right, Prabhu?
If you can, maybe share some pastimes with Srila Prabhupada, your interaction with Srila Prabhupada. Moments.
Well, I'm no Shruti Kirti or Hari Sari, so I don't have hours and hours, but I did have a few opportunities to be with Srila Prabhupada, to serve him. One thing that really sticks in my mind all the time is in 1975, when Prabhupada was in Chicago, I was part of a small number of brahmacharis that had volunteered to clean his quarters each morning when he would go on the morning walk before the Bhagavatam class. And every morning, Prabhupada would come out of the apartment building he was staying in. It was a small four apartment building, you know, 2 upstairs, 2 downstairs. And he would come out and we would put a garland. I was fortunate to be the one to put a garland on him on those mornings. And then we would offer obeisances, of course. This particular morning, it had rained during the night and it was a little misty. It wasn't really raining, but there was a little bit of mist and the ground, of course, was quite wet. And as Prabhupada came out, we put the garland on Srila Prabhupada and then went to get down and offer obeisances, and he stopped us. He said, no, not in the rain and water. You'll become sick and then your service to Krishna will be hampered. And this made such an impact on me. Here is the Guru of the universe, worthy to be worshipped by all the demigods. And yet he was concerned that we as his disciples, more so than us worshiping him, he was concerned about our health and well-being. And that made a real impact on me, that Prabhupada was thinking like that. One other time in Detroit in 1976, Srila Prabhupada was on the veranda of his rooms there, and he was entertaining 2 Catholic priests that had come to speak with him. And there was conversation and discussion on different points, and time came for them to leave. And they excused themselves, and Prabhupada immediately turned to Hari Sari, who was his servant at the time, and said, do they have prasadam? It is most important that they get prasadam. Go and see that some prasadam is given to them. And as Hari Sari was gone doing that, Prabhupada made a point that everyone that comes to Krishna's temple should be given prasadam. This is so important. So those were just a couple of things, instructions that Prabhupada gave that I happened to be a part of hearing and had a very nice impact on me. Distributing prasadam and taking care of our health and well-being, very important to do. As a result, when my wife and I were managing the St. Louis temple some years ago, we always made it a point to see if the devotees were well taken care of, if they had medical needs, you know, whatever the case was, that they were facilitated like that. This is the duty of a leader.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing Prabhupada pastimes.
My pleasure. I love telling these stories.
Wonderful. Yeah. Madhupati Prabhu, are there?
Yeah, thank you very much, Prabhuji. Hari Hari.
All right, well, Madhupati, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Still remember your wonderful association during the installation of Sri Radha Shyam Sundar here.
One of the highlights of my devotional life, I must tell you, I remember that so fondly. It was such a wonderful time.
Yeah, yeah. You were there with Srimati Radharani when we were bringing it from the community hall to the installation study. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And
So
also,
we'll finish there, I guess.
yes, Prabhuji.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you all giving me this invitation to speak with you. And let's look forward to more opportunities down the road.
Sure, Prabhuji. Very well.
Much all glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Nishringa Bhagavan. All glories to Prahlad Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Krishna. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha asmudevascha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo
Vaishnava ki jai.
Jai.
Jai.